All right, we're back again. We had a holiday last week, so sorry to not be here, but that gave everybody, especially the crew, a much-needed break. Some of us were starved for attention, but welcome to the news for the week of 24 January 2021. TikTok, SonicWall, Cisco, fake security blogs, Joe Biden, and C-suite phishing. All this and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
All right, the news. Well, Cisco started off the new year with a bang and a new CVE. CVE 2021-1257 is a high-severity flaw in the Cisco DNA Center web management interface. Again. This is another one of these bugs in a web service that was designed for management of a network device. It's great to have these things. I mean, I will admit that when they first started putting those on ASDM, where they first came out with ASDM for ASA and PICs and all that stuff, it's a really nice tool. But people just apparently, don't understand it. The bug on this particular bug is another cross-site request forgery problem. So we've seen these before. If you aren't familiar, these types of bugs allow you to cause the actual user, so not you necessarily, but they get the actual user to do something other than what they expected to do. So the example I was thinking, it's not this particular bug, but the example I was thinking of was if you could somehow get people to click something that looked like they're clicking the save button or the file button or whatever, and instead of the file button, it actually, installs software, does something like that. But basically, it was a big problem for them. It seems that, people just have not really grasped the idea that these web management tools, which were quite old a lot of times, they have major flaws in them. They need to check on that. It's hard to patch this stuff. But best practices don't expose these things anywhere except in a controlled management network. So that was the idea, was that these are these baseband kind of things, or baseboard kind of things. But a lot of people think that if you've got an HTTP server on a device, you need to put it out on the internet or even put it out in your public network. And if you do it internally, even somebody will exploit it. But if you push this thing out into the public, and a lot of people did that, as the COVID thing kicked in, people started working from home, they pushed these things out with SNATs or whatever, and the next thing you know, you've got people attacking these interfaces. SonicWall said there were probably 0-day flaws in its remote access security products. I was like, okay. I think basically what was happening was things were happening. No one could explain it. So they decided, I think there's probably a 0-day we don't know about. They did say they were currently investigating the Secure Mobile Access 100 series hardware. That particular device is like a proxy type controller, and it basically what it does, it allows you to see what is connecting to your network from outside, and also does user access management. SonicWall did say it was safe to continue using some features of the SMA 100 and their VPN stuff. And they had vetted those, and so they provided a list of things that were okay to do. And they did say that their firewall products were not included in the problem. SonicWall basically said the devices were being targeted by sophisticated attackers, which is starting to sound like a dog whistle for nation states. So when people start saying sophisticated attackers, they usually mean nation states and they can't prove it or don't want to say it. But it did. It did, according to them, as of Friday, NetExtender was safe. So if you use any of those products, you should probably go check out what's safe and what's not. Whether you love it, hate it, or you just read it for the articles, TikTok has been the center of controversy for a while. ByteDance, the owner and developer of TikTok, drew the ire of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who tried to ban the platform from the United States last year. A bunch of TikTok users were causing problems for him, and he got all upset and decided, China and all this, and to ban TikTok. Didn't really work. TikTok has more than 800 million active users, and apparently this bug, which was reported by researchers, has been patched, but it was in the Find Friends feature that contained a database problem. So basically what happens is the attacker could connect the profile details and the phone numbers together. So this was something that's not supposed to be able to happen, but there was a sync feature for contacts, and apparently you could get access to that and then put those two things together so you could figure out who was posting or whatever, or get people's phone numbers. So if you do use TikTok, you may want to ensure that you have patched up. The article itself contains a full layout of the attack, so they had all the details if you want to read that. This article was mostly talking about a podcast, which I probably shouldn't mention on here, but the article talks about how new U.S. President Joe Biden, who took office last week, is rolling out a $10 billion, sorry, I want $1 million. Yeah. But a $10 billion, and it was called a down payment for cybersecurity defense in the U.S. government, and which would include a lot of ramping up of CISA, which sounds like a good idea to me. Tom Kellerman, who did the podcast, he's the head of cyber strategy from VMware Carbon Black, said that the number would very likely grow up to around $100 billion over some period of time in the future. So this may be a turning point for the U.S. government. I think SolarWinds and the election stuff that happened in 2016 and didn't really happen in 2020. But basically in 2016, there was some election stuff that was going on. And then this SolarWinds stuff, along with, if you watch the news with us, you've seen, a lot of stuff going on. All of that seems to be driving somebody. And then add to that the work from home problem that it went on for 2020 and now is continuing into 2021. And the government certainly has a lot of issues to deal with on that. So considering what we spend on kinetic warfare every year, I love that they call it kinetic warfare. It's a very accurate term, but I started hearing that. I really like the term. But kinetic warfare, $100 billion doesn't really sound like very much. I mean, really. I mean, every time they fire one of those rockets or something, it costs like $70,000 just for the the missile. And so $100 billion, it's like nothing. I'm not going to talk a lot about this next story because I know Jason wants to talk about this as well. But Google's Threat Analysis Group monitors global APT activity, and they did announce on Monday that there's an active APT campaign which appears to originate in a government-backed entity based in North Korea. So, that sounds pretty bad. And this was targeting security researchers. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on this. And I know Jason is going to talk about it, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that particular story. So stick around after the break, and Jason will fill you in on the Google APT tag report about researchers being targeted. But basically, this was another one of these kind of like nation-state targeted attacks. It's quite interesting, and I enjoyed reading the story about it. So now I'm just waiting on my stories to catch up so that I can tell you about the next one. But I had a lot on this, and now I don't. So it happens like that sometimes because Jason took my story, and I was going to cry. It was like a whole thing. I had a song worked out. There was like some I had to train a trained animal, and there was all this stuff that was going to happen while I read that story. But we'll see if Jason can live up to that. C-suite level executives have continued being targeted by phishing, which is using a fake Office 365 password expiration attack. And this was reported by Trend Micro. And I don't usually report a lot of phishing attacks because they're so common. But this one was it's been done before, but I wanted people to be aware of it if they weren't, that this is a renewed attack. Basically, it's pretty much exactly what you would expect, but they use the Office 365. Your password needs to be reset. link, and then what they do is they offer you this opportunity that people always take, which is, would you like to just keep your same password? And people go, hell yeah, and they click the keep my password button, and that basically takes you to a phishing page. Probably the really interesting part of this, the phishing is just exactly what you would expect, but the interesting part of this was they were talking about all the credentials that were available for sale as a result of this attack on the dark web, and they were selling everything from CEOs on down. So basically this blog entry from Trend Micro was a pretty comprehensive examination of what is going on in that particular area. So I think it's quite interesting to take a look at. 0-day sales, we've been seeing that for a long time, but it's a marketplace which seems to be moving into maturity now. Basically, what is the value of a 0-day? Well, in the past, people have sold 0 days for millions of dollars on the dark web reputedly. I haven't personally sold any, nor have I bought any, but this was apparently a really high dollar item. And, it's hard to tell, but once you sell it, it's gone, I guess. I mean, if you sell the 0 day and people immediately start exploiting it, I mean, it gets blocked pretty fast or patched. So, then you've lost your product. So you basically came up with, you discovered something really elaborate, and now the product is gone. So according to this article, a much more sophisticated marketplace for 0 days seems to be emerging, which revolves around not selling you the 0 day, but selling access using some some unknown 0 day that is never revealed to you. It's kind of that thing where, like, if you give a person a fish, they can beat you with it. Wait, that's not right. If you give a person a fish, they can eat sushi as cold as a well digger's instep. Something like. If you give a person a 0 day, they can attack you for a day, but if you sell them access to corporate networks, they can. I don't know. I'm not good at those things. But, I mean, basically the idea is that I'll keep my 0 day. I'm not going to reveal what it is. I'm going to get access to various corporate networks. And when you contact me and say, I would like access to Bank X, they say, we can provide that. And they sell you a VPN connection into that corporate network and say, hey, go crazy. I mean, basically, it makes sense to me. If you have some unknown way to bypass server logins and you reveal that, pretty soon, everybody out there is going to be talking about it. And the next thing you know, well, it's kind of obvious that it's there, and pretty soon, it's basically blocked. But if you let people quietly enter these networks and it's not clear how it's being done, and you just sell that, that's a pretty, savvy business type of, investment. This is an extensive article about this practice. So if you're interested in such things, I think that you probably would like to check that article out. So when we return, Jason Wood will join us, and he's going to talk about the Google tag findings. Stick around.
Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires discovery in depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in-depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/BigID. Increased attacks, skill gaps, talent shortages, expanding attack surfaces. Cybersecurity and IT teams face these real issues every day. CyberArray for Teams is the #1 NIST-aligned DoD 8140 and 8570 compliance certification and skills training platform. CyberArray for Teams makes managing teams easier, guarantees measurable training outcomes, and keeps your team's skills sharp to meet today's biggest security threats. And did you know 96% of the Fortune 500 have employees training on CyberArray? CyberArray for Teams. Now you know. Visit cyberarray.it/solved to solve your team training challenges.
Well, he made a lot of money with his chain of Haggis street carts called...
And he loses it right there. This week.
Well, I was like a chain of Haggis street carts. Yeah, I was like, that was. I won't even read the rest of them. I had a whole bunch of them there. But sushi on the International Space Station. The cleanup of Mir after the infamous pork and beans incident. Yeah, those were all good. So but I'm sorry, Haggis street carts. Just And we were off for yeah. But anyway, it's celebrity chef Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. So, goodness, Doug and I are off to an excellent start on the expert commentary.
Happy New Year!
So yeah, I debated on stealing this one from Doug, and then I thought about it and decided, well, there's enough here for us to talk about. But then I made the mistake of mentioning to Doug I was going to talk about this, so he just kind of punted on what he was going to say. So yeah, if you haven't heard the news already, security researchers are being targeted, appears, by a state-sponsored group out of what they're speculating is North Korea. And I wanted to talk really not so much about the article or blog post by Google, but maybe a little bit of the human side of this, how the security researcher, at least a security researcher, felt about this and how what his experience was like. And then second, we'll take a brief look at, some of the technical bits of this implant. So the Register was where I got the first article. It was about a security researcher who was targeted directly by this attack. A gentleman by the name of Alejandro Caceres was targeted, and his first reaction was something we could probably all understand. It was basically, how the heck am I being targeted by a country? I've seen people say on Twitter in the past, if your threat model includes being targeted by a nation state, you're doing it wrong, but not in this case. Obviously, we need to amend that threat model a little bit. Normally, we'd expect somebody like that, a nation state, to be interested in, large organizations. They have intellectual property that their folks are interested in, or that countries would be interested in, or money that would be worth stealing or something like that. If you're an individual, you don't normally think that, hey, they were going to be coming after me. But that's exactly the case here. Then Caceres says his next reaction was one of anger. He actually has put up an $80,000 bounty for information, high quality information about the person who targeted him. And I saw a tweet that he responded to with that said, "Hey, if you put up 80K, I'll match that." So potentially, we're looking at 160K for grabs for anybody that has good information about the attacker, who goes by the name of James Willie. Basically the name being used here. It looks like the attackers basically had created social media profiles and videos and blog posts and all kinds of things over time to add to their credibility, and now they're using that and making a play with it. Now, in this case, for Alejandro, it was not the case that this was not somebody who contacted him with social media or some kind of email to get him to do something. This was an instance where he had a vulnerability broker that he works with, that he knows, that he sells information to, and that he was referred to by this vulnerability broker. And the gentleman's name supposedly was James Willie, like I said. The three of them hop together into a group chat. They're talking about it. He delivers him basically a Visual Studio Code project. Alejandro loads it up. And it looks like it was, according to him, that this was a legitimate 0-day. It caused the crash. Looked like it was something that was, had some potential here, but it didn't work beyond causing the crash. And James's play was, "Hey, can you help me make this thing go?" And they talked about, who was going to get credit for it and all this other stuff. Things fall apart. And unfortunately, because for the researcher, because he had somebody who was vouched for by somebody he trusted, he was a little bit more casual about reviewing the code. He probably would have been more suspicious had somebody said, "Hey, download this code from the internet and give it a go," who he didn't know or anything like that, because this guy's somewhat known, vouched for again by this other person that he knows. He pulled down the code and ran and built the project, and then ran the exploit. This is going to be a risk that all of us face. We have people that we know and we trust. And if somebody that we know and trust comes to us and says, hey, this is a good person over here, they've got something interesting, that extends credibility to them and makes it more likely for us to maybe skip some steps to protect ourselves. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of this attack. Now, in the case of Caceres or Alejandro, he says a few days later, the vulnerability broker came back and talked to him and says, hey, I just got a report from somebody else that noticed that this person or another person, they tried to pop their machine. You need to see what's going on. So he went back, checks his machine, checks the source code, and found a malicious PowerShell command buried in the Visual Studio project. And I'll get back to that here in a bit. But basically, the command checks to, is this a Windows 10 system? Is it 64-bit? And is there a file on the system that it expects to see there in the case of this project being, unpacked and ready for build? And Caceres speculates that the attackers were basically looking for information about vulnerabilities that he was working on, exploits that he had, anything they could, potentially steal to, for them to leverage in their own intrusions. So, I definitely have seen, in my work, you're looking at things and you see state-sponsored adversaries making use of tools that are publicly known. They use that to blend in. They use that because it's easy, who knows. But they also do their own research into new capabilities. You'll see them use their own custom tooling. But in this case, I was kind of scratching my head and thinking, well, maybe they're running short on tools and just want to, steal that from somebody else, not spend the time developing it on their own. So it's been interesting to see how this plays out over time and what the impact to security researchers are and how willing they are to engage with people. Finally, I included a blog post by Kevin Perlow that did some analysis on the DLL that was delivered by the attackers in this campaign. And that PowerShell command in the Visual Studio Code project was actually a build event that would execute as you compile the code. What happens there is the payload uses some masquerading. It's executing a DLL using run DLL 32, but it doesn't use a .dll extension. It uses .db. It also, what else? It drops a file named vmnat-update.bin in his case and puts it in C program data/VMware. And it also creates a registry run key that pretends to be an update to Microsoft OneDrive. So they're masquerading, trying to blend in a little bit there, to things that maybe would be common on a virtual machine running a Windows 10. The author also speculates that the second stage, there was two stages he was looking at. The second stage is where the actor would get access to the system, provide them the ability to run operating system commands, do recon, things like that. But he did say that is a little bit of speculation on his part because he didn't observe actor activity in his testing. But certainly would fall in line with the capabilities that a threat actor would want if they were looking to steal data from that end system. And I would think you might also see some ability to exfiltrate data, get it copied off the system, and send it out. Both of these articles are interesting to read, worth taking a look at. So go ahead and hit the show notes, and if you're interested in that aspect beyond what was in the Google blog post, I would recommend taking a look at both of those. Kevin Perlow gets into the assembly and some other stuff as well. So going to be an interesting story to see how this develops out. Definitely fun.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I do think this is an adaptation of an old thing. There used to be a thing where sometimes nation states, or I don't know who the people were, but they would contact like academics and grad students and stuff and say, I'm working on something similar, and they would use these kind of cold reading tactics like they did here, where they create Twitter accounts and they created fake vulnerabilities and things. But they would come up, like they would know who was working on something because they could look at their publication history in the world and they go, oh, this person works on nuclear power. They would call them up and go, I'm also working on nuclear fuel rod, control systems. I'd love to share some of my research that's being done, by me. Would you be interested in collaboration? And then, of course, they get you to get, they didn't have a way to install malware, but they would get people to send them copies of sometimes, classified research, all kinds of stuff. And so, this is an advanced tactic, but it's also very effective because, people love to share their work. That's why they're doing it. And when somebody contacts you, says, wow, you're doing such great things. And I think the whole Twitter angle, there were in that article, there were LinkedIn accounts, there were Twitter accounts, there was Telegram accounts that were all associated with this thing. So they really went out of their way to make it look, pretty doable. So it's a very interesting story. You should probably read
They did toss up what appeared to be a working 0 day out of this.
Yeah.
Not a super significant one, but they found a vulnerability and they used that to establish their credibility. So pretty wild.
A Judas goat. Sacrifice that one to draw somebody out, or a Judas goat is what that's called. All right. And thank you, Jason. And finally, sometime next year, the first private citizens will lift off in a commercial spacecraft, the SpaceX Dragon, to spend 8 sunny days on the International Space Station. It will be the first time that paying passengers have been launched into space on a commercial rocket. Now, Russia had previously launched people from Baikonur and taken paying customers up on the Soyuz spacecraft, but this is the first commercial rocket that's going to actually have paying customers. And apparently it's a bit expensive to do, and NASA, who controls the space station, I guess, in some way, said they charge $35,000 per day per passenger for food and I guess air and those other things you might need, if you're out in space. And it is kind of a captive audience. So I guess, if you decide not to pay up or your credit card gets rejected, they're just like, we'll just turn this air valve off and you call when you've changed your mind about paying. Virgin Atlantic had also been taking paying customers to the edge of space, and Blue Origin, which is Bezos's company that does this, had also said they were going to start taking people up to the edge of space. And those were $250,000 to go to the edge of space, which is, edging. Wow. But mostly you probably spent that time vomiting, I would guess. So that's what most people have as a result of weightlessness. So when, you don't really have time to get used to it while they're running your credit card. But apparently getting there is quite pricey as well to get to the space station. So the total cost for this, get this, the 8-day excursion was reported as $55 million per person. And I guess that's coach. I don't know if they have upgrades or, whatever. But, Ryanair said they will be offering something similar for only 500 pounds, but you will have to be able to survive being launched from a giant slingshot and able to hold your breath for about 3 hours. And that's the news. In the continuing time of plague, there is a vaccine. It's being distributed. The science says use it. Please take it if they offer it to you. Come on, take the damn vaccine. I'm Doug White, and that's the news.